Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate that you came on the last day of RSA at 8:30 in the morning. Definitely impressed by how many people have woken up. So we're hoping to have a really enriching and insightful conversation. I'm excited to be on stage today with some of my esteemed colleagues to talk about the evolution of public-private partnerships to operational collaboration and what that means to us. So what I'm going to ask is that each of my colleagues introduce themselves and talk a little bit about operational collaboration for their specific organizations and departments and kind of where they are now and where they're going. So I'll turn it over to Cynthia first.
Well, thank you. So really excited to be here with all of you today. My name is Cynthia Kaiser. I am a Deputy Assistant Director with FBI Cyber Division, where I oversee all of the division's intelligence, policy, and engagement efforts. So, I think the FBI has really been doing tons of engagement with private industry for decades. We've been at the heart of being able to interact with people in our local areas across the nation and being there as the partner, especially when something happens and we're there to investigate. I think where you're really seeing us evolve, though, is to take those relationships, build on them, but then think, what else can we do? How else can we partner to really counter cyber adversaries together? So I see that really as two areas: sharing the benefits of our authorities and sharing the benefits of our people. With authorities, as both a law enforcement entity and intelligence entity, we have a lot of ability to conduct investigations or operations against cyber adversaries. That includes the kind of typical legal process, subpoenas, warrants, et cetera, the intelligence processes like utilizing FISA authorities, and also our ability to have confidential sources or even work with law enforcement abroad to obtain information from them. So taking all of that to bear and then being able to share that so that we can have proactive operations. I think second to that is the people. We're not really known as a DC-based agency. We have 56 field offices across the nation, and we really have the largest cadre of technically talented individuals from the federal government across the nation. And that means we can have these local relationships where we conduct local operations, local efforts together. That's, if you are in Omaha, we have a computer scientist there to assist. If you're in Miami, we have a technically trained agent there to assist, and we've worked really hard over the last few years to make sure each of our field offices have computer scientists, data analysts, specially trained intelligence analysts, and special agents so that we can really be that partner in thinking, like, what else can we do? How can we have two-way flow of information? And how can we say, yeah, something bad happened here, something bad might happen, but how can we turn it around and really counter the adversaries that are really targeting us?
Fantastic. Thanks, Cynthia. So Clayton?
Thanks, Cynthia. Thanks, Morgan. Clayton Romans. I'm the Associate Director at CISA, leading the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, or at least I was until a few minutes ago when I became a middle-aged cybersecurity model. I think I just found my new calling with one shot and done with this portrait this morning. So thank you, everyone, for indulging that. It's fantastic to be here. I echo Morgan's thanks for getting up early for this session. This is very exciting to have all of us on the same stage. We work together daily. We work across our agencies to actually be in the same place and to show how we do it is pretty cool. So at CISA, our primary mission is to reduce cyber risk to critical infrastructure. And when we stood up the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, we decided to advance that mission by not only sending information out and deploying services and capabilities to the partners and stakeholders that we have, but to link them in real time into a true persistent collaboration model. And that's really what my team does inside of the agency and across our federal enterprise. We work very closely with all of the agencies on the stage here, working with the intelligence community to better understand the threat activity that we're facing, working with law enforcement. I think Cynthia said it perfectly. There are a multiplicity of investigative results that can inform the mitigation guidance that we're sharing with critical infrastructure. And the SRMAs in the US government have the deepest and best understanding of how their sectors work, their subsectors work, national critical functions we're trying to protect work. So in the whole of government model, we really need this expertise to come together. And we've built JCDC as the fulcrum and the focal point for doing that. So we have partnerships across industry, 227, I think, in my last count. We work with over 100 international organizations, many of whom are here today. We work very closely with our state and local community through the multi-state ISAC. And we work across the federal government, both on the IC side, the law enforcement side, the SRMA side, to just throw a bunch of DC acronyms at you, but also with the technical personnel at the 100+ federal agencies that are facing many of the same threats that we're trying to counter for critical infrastructure. And our goal is to establish really easy ways to come to the government in a unified mechanism, bring and enrich all of our talents and expertise, as Cynthia said, the people, the capabilities, the authorities, and then plan our attack for how we're going to reduce that risk. We do that in a variety of ways, and we'll talk about that today. But over the past year and a half plus of the JCDC, it's been fantastic to build this collaboration across this group and with our partners across the world.
Thank you so much, Clayton. And we're really excited to have Kyle here. He's the interim director for the Energy Threat Analysis Center, which is new. So Kyle, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, thanks Morgan, and good morning. I'll add my thanks for being up at 8:30 in the morning on the last day of the conference. So the ETAC, the Energy Threat Analysis Center, is a new cybersecurity operational collaborative run out of the Department of Energy, but in coordination with all the partners that you see up here, as well as other intelligence community elements. It was called out in the recently released National Cybersecurity Strategy, and we are really just sort of getting off the ground. So we're in a pilot phase right now. And so the goal of the ETAC is to really develop intentional, ongoing collaboration between DOE, but also other partners, some of whom you see on stage here, and the private sector. So we've started with 4 investor-owned utilities and the EISAC, the Energy Information Sharing and Analysis Center, to sort of pilot this approach to share information and really sort of see what's going on private sector networks and what are we seeing from government reporting streams and how can we marry up that information to really sort of connect the dots and build a better collective defense posture. Over the next year to year and a half, we'll be adding additional electric sector partners as well as partners from oil and natural gas to really ensure that we're looking across the entire energy sector and connecting dots between things that we're seeing on the ONG side, oil and natural gas side, to the electricity side, and pulling in relevant reporting streams from JCDC or NSA or FBI or maybe even Treasury. So I look forward to working with some of you in the future on this. I will also note we are leveraging the DOE National Laboratories to conduct a lot of research and development activities to support a lot of the pilot activities for ETAC, and that's been really really helpful as we try to think about the R&D that's needed to really deliver the cutting edge, ready to go technology to support the ETAC mission.
Thank you. And Todd.
All right, thanks. Good to see everyone. I'm Todd Conklin, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Treasury's Office of Cybersecurity and Critical Infrastructure Protection. Also counselor to Treasury Deputy Secretary for Internal Cybersecurity issues. And Treasury is very unique as a sector risk management agency for the financial sector in that Treasury is also a main player in the financial sector in terms that it manages its own critical infrastructure. So we kind of have to eat our dog food as well, right? So we manage the auction sites, we manage debt collection. We also serve as the bank for the entire U.S. government, right? So that raises Treasury's profile. Plus, we lead sanctions activities targeting some of our worst nation-state actors, which also makes the Treasury infrastructure a particularly juicy target to nation-state actors and some hacktivist organizations. So we're very much part of the sector in addition to being a sector risk management agency. So we've been trying to blend that operational mindset in how we approach the SRMA role over the last 2 years. And I think we've done a really good job. It's really helped the relationship really grow. And we're really riding on a lot of the work that everyone who just spoke is doing in terms of helping us with the rapid intelligence sharing process. So Treasury is a main part of that and making sure that information gets to all the critical operators in as close to real time as possible. And we did a really great job, all of us, I think, in the lead up to the Russia-Ukraine escalation hostilities there, making sure that we had all the pipes in place to make sure we could actually pull that off successfully. And we did some really unique things through support of CISA in particular with establishing direct Slack channels with key participants in the sector. I think that where we have to go now is really grow that into more of a real-time scalable model. And that's something that we're really focused on this year. So Treasury's partnered with Cloudflare and also one of the DOE labs, Pacific Northwest National Labs, to see if we can't, again, ride on the work that NSA and FBI have already done in this space to develop kind of this more protective DNS model, as well as CISA, and then scale that more directly to the financial sectors, that we could share that critical information in real time directly to the core operators and cut down some of that middleman process that became a bit of a pain point during some periods of time over the last few years, right? Making sure that all the critical information is getting to everyone as quickly as possible, and to the operators who actually can do something about it, as opposed to going through the various different layers of each bureaucracy. So the other main track of Treasury's work is really elevating our role for when there is an incident impacting the sector. And one of the lessons we learned from the Colonial Pipeline hack is just how quickly information spreads. We all knew that, right? But how that impacts human behavior. So really, in that situation, a relatively minor low-level cyber incident caused a supply chain ripple effect because human behavior took over. And we're trying to avoid that in the future if there is some sort of impact in the financial sector in particular. So Treasury rebuilt our incident response playbook with the financial sector in total lockstep. And that updated incident response playbook places Treasury at the center of the public communications in the event that there is some sort of impact targeting the financial sector. And that the first time we actually leveraged that in real time was during the ION incident, where you saw some messaging from me directly, and also Treasury press releases to try to calm what was becoming an incorrect media narrative that the situation was going to be impactful to the markets. And we were able to change very quickly the media narrative on that because of all of the work we did over the last year and a half building out that connectivity with the sector. So,
thanks, Todd, for that. So, as I said before, and and you're here, my name's Morgan Adamski, and I'm the director of the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center. I am a moderator, but I'm also good to be part of this fantastic collective. And if you know anything about the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center, it was established a little over 3 years ago. It really signifies a huge shift in the National Security Agency for how we are directly sharing our information and expertise with the private sector to scale mitigations to as many people as possible. When I break down what our missions are at the CCC, just for background, it's how do we deal with the threats today, how do we protect against them tomorrow, and how do we secure the technology of the future. And so what we are doing is deep analytical collaboration with our private sector partners to better understand, detect, and characterize threats. We do that work with our Cyber Command colleagues. If you heard about Under Advisement earlier this week, we do that with a lot of private sector partners who have deep insights. Our goal is to be able to understand the threat and then be able to share that with our colleagues here on stage so they can get it out to all of the sectors. Secondly, for what we're trying to do to protect tomorrow, specifically we're also offering free cybersecurity services to the defense industrial base. Those are unique because we are infusing intel and expertise into that service so that all the companies enrolled in them are benefiting from what we know based on our capabilities at the National Security Agency. We pair those capabilities with our friends across DoD to include the DoD Cyber Crime Center, DC3, so that we have a comprehensive view of all the DIB contractors. If you know, the DIB is 300,000 companies. That number keeps going up, I think. And so we really just want to make sure we can baseline and protect them. And then lastly, how we're securing future technology. The Center for Cybersecurity Standards works at the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center. Essentially, they are really focused on submitting proposals to cybersecurity standards bodies or standards development organizations that are focused on 5G, 6G, protecting crypto standards, IP, AI, ML, IoT standards. And so they're focusing on making sure that we are secure by design, really focusing on that future technology aspect of it. So those are the three core missions of the CCC. So I said a word that is very important in the cybersecurity community: scale. Like, how do you scale that success? It is a word I'm sure we're all frightened because we constantly get asked by our bosses, do that more often and faster. Yes, got it. So I want to talk a little bit about what is the significance of partnerships when it comes to scale? And Kyle, I wanted to start with you.
Sure. Well, I'll come at this from an energy perspective, and I'll say, if I look at the 2023 Worldwide Threat Assessment, we see, for several years running that foreign adversaries continue to grow in their capability to disrupt the energy infrastructure. And so it's really important that we can scale across the energy sector. And as I talked about earlier, right now we're predominantly working with a small subset of electric utilities through the ETAC, though the Office of Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response within DOE, which houses ETAC, of course, has connections and relationships across the energy space. But we want to ensure that we grow so that we can really have a true collective defense that helps us connect the dots between what we see on public networks, what we have in terms of information flow on the government side. And so as we scale, we need to make sure that we have good coordinating structures and mechanisms both within the federal family as well as those really strong partnerships in blue sky conditions with our industry colleagues. And so once again, the scaling and partnerships are the most critical piece of the puzzle when it comes to collective mitigation and collective defense.
Thanks, that's it. So when we think about scale at the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center, we really are focusing on the quality of our relationships over the quantity, especially when we're talking about deep analytical exchange, focusing on the threats that we're seeing on any given day. That means working with the biggest and best cybersecurity companies who have the broadest reach and can protect the most customers at once. That's really critical. If you think about that, if I'm able to share threat information on a specific actor to a cloud provider or an internet service provider, and they're able to develop a defensive signature, a mitigation, an endpoint protection, put it into their platform, we're talking about protecting billions of customers worldwide. And that's how we're really thinking about scale right now and who we're partnering with. And then secondly, really trying to focus on getting our cybersecurity services out to the supply chain, the key providers, those weapons systems, the weapons platforms that our military relies on, as well as securing the future technology. When you think about what are the key technologies coming on that are going to support the Department of Defense, I'm not going to say the AI word, because I feel like that's the buzzword of RSA, but it is. And so that's a lot of the work that we're doing today. Clayton, did you want to offer anything on the scale side for JCDC?
Sure. I mean, one other thing I would add that I think complements both of these work streams and activities is, completely agree with Morgan's framing of needing to find the close and capable partners who bring unique capabilities to the U.S. government and really to this whole collective. Then figuring out how we leverage that insight and expertise, whether it's in the systems that we run from the U.S. government or in the communication and advice and guidance that we put out to the world. And I'm very proud of the work that we've done across this group over the past couple of years. Each of us used to publish information to our stakeholders in the critical infrastructure community individually 2 or 3 years ago. And over the past 2 to 3 years, I think on the stage we've done some joint publication across this whole group, at least once collectively and regularly every other week across a subset of this group, depending on who's seeing the threat activity, which companies we're working with, who we're able to bring into the collaboration process to shape what that guidance looks like before we put it out to a broad global community. So when you see cybersecurity advisories from the US government now, you see them from FBI and from CISA and from NSA and from DOE and Treasury. You see them from the UK and Australia and New Zealand and Canada at the same time. And getting that level of expertise that brings in not only what's resident to our respective agencies, but to the partners that we bring to the table is fantastic. And then unifying it and putting it out together. So I'd say, it's hard to reach every stakeholder one-to-one. It's hard to provide every service. And so the way, where we can scale with the insights that we've collected and been able to shape as a community is really important.
Thanks, Clayton. So I'm going to pivot the conversation a little bit to ransomware. We've had a lot of challenges as it relates to ransomware, Russia, China, a lot of conversations. Obviously, there's great coalitions that are being formed. So Cynthia, where have you found success in really tackling that challenge from an FBI perspective?
Well, I think we've found success on ransomware and across the nation state actors in targeting the key services that these actors use or the tools they use. And I think that goes to what you were just discussing on scale. Not just kind of whack-a-mole, take one down, another one pops up, but like what we ask ourselves is how do we really accomplish great success across nation state actors, across ransomware groups. So, as we talk a lot about, say, well, there's not a bright line where cyber criminal activity ends and nation state activity begins. And I think we've kind of talked about that in the challenges arena. But there's also a lot of opportunities there because as all of our actors use the same tools and services, all of our options increase too. And a great example of that recently was the takedown of ChipMixer, which was a service that allowed many different nation state actors and ransomware actors to mixed currencies, try to hide their tracks or fund their activities. But the example I really wanted to use was actually a little more on the nation state side from a year ago, which is in about mid-2019, we learned that the Russian military intelligence services were creating a global botnet by implanting malware across thousands of devices from a US company. And so once we learned about the operation, we went and talked with that US company. We went and said, how can we come up with a fix here? What's the problem here? And how can we really counter these Russian actors? We brought together a lot of folks on this stage. I know, NSA was a part of it, CIS was a part of that. And we really looked at two phases to be able to counter this activity. One was, how do we fix the vulnerability? And that was bringing all the bright technical minds together, including the private sector company, looking at the problem, developing the technical fix, creating the technical mitigation guidance, putting that out through the cybersecurity advisories, and ensuring the company also had the support they needed to be able to do the back-end tech support to try to fix those devices. But then to counter the adversaries before they could really use this botnet to wreak havoc across the world, we conducted a court-authorized operation to cut off the command and control infrastructure for that global botnet, really stopping it before it became a larger problem. And we couldn't have done that without, I think, the partnership on this stage, but also the partnership of that local cybersecurity or cyber industry company who said, yes, we have something going on, but let's partner, let's figure out a way to fix it together.
Clayton, I know you talk about ransomware a lot. Do you want to share just where you have found success from a CISA perspective, or any examples if you have them?
Sure, and I think Cynthia did a great job framing, we recently stood up as our two agencies, the Joint Ransomware Task Force. It involves participation from all of our agencies, and there's really, two core pillars of this work. There's the disruption lane where we're really trying to counter the adversary and take the fight to them and attack infrastructure and do some fantastically effective things that the FBI has been leading. Then we have the defense side and the protection side, and that's really where CISA has been focused. And one area that I'm pretty excited about as we've stood up a number of industry relationships over the past few years is finding partners who have unique visibility into the networks of many of the owners and operators who are going to be or have been attacked by ransomware. We get tips that are high fidelity from researchers, we get them from JCDC partners, we get them from our government partners, and we're able to warn whether it's a school, whether it's a local business, we have examples of hospitals, warn owners and operators that we are seeing ransomware actors or gangs inside their networks. They haven't yet encrypted traffic. They can make changes to their networks to avoid encryption, and we've been able to save millions of dollars just doing this work stream. So this is something that we're still thinking about. To get back to Morgan's first question, how do we scale that? It's awesome. We've protected over 100 organizations just in 2023 alone, but we're a very large country and a very large world. So I think as we take the information that we're getting from these industry relationships, we bring them to the interagency and to this task force. We think about how that can inform our disruption activities at scale, and we think about how we can work with service providers to take actions upstream so that we're not relying on the educational institution to save itself. We still have a lot of work to do, but in the meantime, I think this is a great example of going from information sharing to actual collaboration to leverage the unique insights of our partners.
Thank you. So Todd, I know that the financial sector spends a lot of time thinking about ransomware. Can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of trends and how the federal response is impacting it?
Yeah, and I won't talk about trends in ransomware, although FinCEN's pushed out a lot of really great reporting on that over the last couple months. So check out the FinCEN website if you want to know about the ransomware trends on the criminal side.
Take notes.
I'll talk more about the USG response and how that's kind of evolved, especially over the last 2 years. I feel like 2 years we were very much in a mode of cyber hygiene. Right, and we pushed out StopRansomware.gov through CISA, and everyone contributed to that. We've definitely pivoted to much more of really an older model, I would say, really in how we approached, how we targeted international narcotics organizations and transnational criminal organizations. We've really kind of adopted that model now and transferred it to this space, and it's really profoundly changed how much impact we've been able to have across the interagency. And there's a process called the Consolidated Priority Organization Target List, which has existed for years in the more traditional transnational criminal organization and narco space, where the interagency comes together and say, these are our top 10 priority targets. We're going to throw everything we have at them. Treasury, you're going to handle the money laundering piece. DOJ handles the piece. The intel community handles the piece, right? And we all focus. And we've really gotten to that level, especially over the last 6 months, where there's been just a profound change in how clearly defined we are in terms of what we're going after. Everyone contributing to that effort, and then what's Treasury's role? Very similar in the narco and TCO space. It's to cut off the money flows, and crypto obviously takes a lot of the oxygen in this space, but it's just the latest vehicle that international criminals, in this case, cyber criminals, are using to profit from their illegal activity, right? So how is Treasury then specifically focusing its targeting effort? It's really around targeting darknet markets, non-compliant exchanges, and also the mixer ecosystem. And those are really the big three to make sure that we maintain visibility and also get an ability for our law enforcement partners to eventually be able to claw back some of this activity, which has been really a great success due to the interagency collaboration.
Fantastic. Kyle, do you want to share anything from an energy perspective?
Sure. I mean, of course, this is top of mind given the Colonial Pipeline incident from a couple of years ago, and maybe I'll just offer a few thoughts. I think one of the biggest trends is, at least within the Department of Energy, which is, of course, the sector risk management agency for energy, we really focused on cyber incident response, but now with the advent of ETAC, we're really trying to bring together that pre-incident analysis and collaboration so that carries forward throughout any consequence management activities that DOE or the federal family may be called upon to sort of leverage during an incident like Colonial or some other type of ransomware attack. I think looking out, one of the biggest trends is going to be watching how this group works together, maybe through JCDC, as sort of this hub and spoke model to ensure that our partnerships are appropriately leveraged, contextualized, and then fed into DHS to ensure that we're seeing cross-sector anomalies and really connecting the dots across the 16 or 17 critical infrastructure sectors.
Thanks. And I want to pull a thread a little bit on what everyone's kind of touched on, is a lot of times any idea that we're getting and there's an incident going on is coming from the victim, right? And it's so important. We talk about the intelligence community, the National Security Agency, FBI, sharing more information, more intelligence out to private sector entities, especially contexts. That's what they're looking for. IOCs, indicators, technical information doesn't really mean anything unless you tell people why they should care. And so you always need that context. But most of the time, we have gotten great insights through partners who have come to us when they're seeing something on their network that they just don't understand, but they want to work with you to better characterize it. And I think that's a really key part of operational collaboration and information sharing, is that it is bidirectional, and it's critical that people come early and often to that trusted relationship to have that conversation. We talk about examples. I know recently we had an example this past winter where we had a DIB entity that was looking at an intrusion on their network. They didn't understand it. They believed it was pervasive. They were able to share information with us, and in talking with our colleagues, we were able to really do this in-depth analysis in which we created a hunt guide for them to be able to find the adversary, and then we were able to take that hunt guide and actually share it out to other DIB entities that we figured were being targeted. And then they were able to find it. And then we were able to make the hunt guide better. And then we were able to give the hunt guide to our partners, and they were able to give it out to their sectors, right? It's this constant iteration. It's never a one and done thing. Nothing is in cyber, right? You wish it is, but it's not. And so I would just offer that perspective is definitely something that we've seen happen more often now over the last 2 years, is really people coming to the table to have that conversation, not just to help themselves, but to help other people in other sectors. And that's a really critical aspect of it. And so with that, I'm going to pivot to a question I didn't prepare any of you for, but I know that you can speak to, is just what are the lessons learned from really executing these public-private partnerships and operational collaboration. I'd like to go to you first, Todd, if that's okay.
And it really comes down to baking it into our actual policies as well, organizationally. So it's one thing to sit on the stage together and talk about it, but when OFAC, for example, pushed out its updated guidance on ransomware payments, a main element of that guidance is reporting early to law enforcement, right? To make sure that we start that flow of information directly to FBI, directly to CISA, and we baked it into the guidance that we pushed out publicly, and then that also then gets reflected in enforcement actions, right? Did you follow that guidance? Did you talk to FBI? Did you loop in CISA at the time of an incident? And that it's not just, you know, it's great to share information and to pass emails, but we also have to then bake it into our actual process flows so that it becomes part of the culture of each organization.
Yeah, from an energy perspective, I would sort of offer that we need to make sure that there's a value proposition on both sides. And so understanding what the private sector partners are going to get from government and following through on those promises or those commitments is really important. The same thing, having engaged, vibrant energy sector partners or private sector partners in the energy space, providing necessary information to the government is also really valuable. So just sort of defining what those value propositions are and then following through on them is really key to avoid stakeholder fatigue.
Clayton?
And I would echo your point about value propositions, and I think at the heart of any good collaboration is trust. Our whole model in JCDC is based on voluntary relationships, and that doesn't work unless you have a clear understanding of what you're doing together, what mutual expectations are, what mutual value propositions exist. And we found success if we have a capable and willing partner. That's what we need. We can work with many people across, I think, all of our agencies across the country, and where we really have found a difference is when we find partners who are willing to solve a problem, who recognize that although we are evolving, we haven't gotten everything exactly right yet from the U.S. government side, and that's why we're coming to them, and treating partners like co-equals and really bringing them into what I think is a new way of doing business for the federal government. So extending that opportunity and then holding ourselves accountable, I think, has pushed us to a higher level of collaboration.
Cynthia, lessons learned?
So I think, echoing, and amplifying all of those, two real lessons learned for us has been that success in this space is two-track. It's one level is the great operations that we're all conducting to fix the vulnerabilities, to scale across, to take that fight back to the adversary to stop them from targeting U.S. networks to begin with. And then the other is being responsive when there's a U.S. victim here. And having U.S. companies know that they can call the U.S. government and get a response quickly, get the help they need, get the advice they need, is just critical to the entire ecosystem understanding of where cyber threats are coming, but also having the trust built into that system that we're going to be there, we're going to help them. And I'd say my second lesson learned is that it can't be just domestic. A lot of us have been going more and more out into that international space because cyber adversaries aren't just targeting the U.S. They're targeting our allies abroad. They're targeting so many other things. We saw the cyber attacks against Albania last year. We've seen ransomware attacks across the world. And when we're able to be that great international partner, we're able to also glean understanding that we can bring back to the U.S. and help all of the network owners here understand threats that may be coming from all corners of the world.
Absolutely. And so I would just add on to that when we talk about success and challenges. We've all heard the statement that it gets extremely frustrating if you are a private sector entity and you get your door knocked on by 8 different agencies, right? We understand that. We've heard that. And we are doing things to make that more efficient and to try to improve when we're doing that to in multiple different fronts. But what I would offer is that oftentimes we all are looking to have a different conversation, right? For different reasons and different purposes. And so we need to have a unity of effort on how we approach that company, but we likely still need to have different conversations. And so I think we're just trying to figure out how that model works and scales and how do we make it easier on you guys. I will offer, I often talk to 8 different reps in every company. So, it's how do we just make it more efficient for everyone? And I think that's just something that we can all work together
on in terms of how do we move forward. I want to just pivot to our last question, then I'm going to open it up for questions as well, is, what piece of advice would you give to the private sector and to the U.S. government on, forming these partnerships? Where do they get started? What's that first step look like? Todd, do you want to start?
Yeah, great question. I think, frankly, CISA and FBI, this is where they're really best suited, given they're both global and also local footprints in your offices. Treasury is obviously a little bit more centralized in DC. That being said, we do have an OSIP cord box and a 24/7 hotline that we'll make sure if you go to the treasury.gov website, it's if you Google OSIP, once you're in that, you'll find our way to get to us 24/7, and we'll respond to you if you email us on that box, we promise. So that's one easy way to get to us. But in terms of scaling that partnership, though, aside from those one-offs, it's really there's a series across the financial sector, especially of trades groups for different niche issues or different niche areas, and that's a really easy vehicle to attach to, especially if you have a smaller footprint as a company, to make sure that you're getting the benefits of everything that we're doing across the board. We make a point to stop at all of the trades to make sure that we're reaching as wide of an audience as possible. So that's kind of an easy one. If you have a smaller staff footprint and you just want to attach to one vehicle, I would join a trade, and then you could get direct access to us through that as well.
Kyle, anything for energy?
Yeah, sure. I would just sort of say for the private sector folks in the room, if you are interested in engaging with a government entity and you maybe don't know where to start, go to dhs.gov, go to DOE.gov if you're a SMRA or if you're an energy sector partner, or sort of figure out the right federal agency. I guarantee you there's someone who's going to be very excited and very happy to chat with you, and will help you make the right connections to ensure that you're getting the information that you need and that you have a seat at the table. The one other thing I'll just sort of note, and Clayton used these words, but or the word trust. I think a lot of what we do here is really brokering in trust, and so ensuring that we follow through on sort of what we talk about, you follow through on what you talk about is really important to building those strong and lasting relationships that we can leverage both pre-incident as well as during a cyber response.
That's great. Then I'd add to Kyle. So for us, slight website change would be CISA.gov/JCDC. If you go through, we'll find it. But honestly, there are a number of different ways going through the web that'll connect directly to our team. We have CISA personnel across the nation. If you don't know them, happy to try to get you in touch through any outreach to our team, and we can connect the dots there. I think one of the things that's really cool about this collaboration on the stage is that this happens all the time. And to Morgan's point, we are working with many of the same companies. We may be doing different things. We may sometimes be doing similar things and then work together. But if I'm talking to an energy sector company that I know needs to talk to DOE, I know where to call, and we have those channels in place. And that's not something I think we could have said with confidence 5 years ago. So the good thing is for the stakeholder, talking to one of us is going to eventually get you to the right person, maybe multiple people. But for JCDC, there are a number of opportunities to participate in our efforts, and at a minimum receive some of the advisories and the information that is the result of the partnership work that we do. So CISA.gov/JCDC.
Thanks, Clayton.
So adding to those points, I think if you go onto FBI.gov, you find your local field office and you give them a call, we'll connect you before you ever have a problem to our cyber squad. In your incident response plan, it's great to have the contact information for the person that you're going to call if something occurs. So that local cyber agent, the folks you're going to call at CISA, your sector risk management agency, make sure you have all that information early, have that engagement early, because you don't want the first call into some of these groups to be when you're in the middle of a crisis. And if you build those relationships early, it also enables you to have a better sense of what you're going to be able to receive from all of those interactions, as well as what you're going to be able to give, what we're going to be looking for in a crisis, so that we can help you and we can help those across your industry or across the nation really be able to counter the threat you might be facing.
Yeah, and hopefully what you're seeing is that you have a lot of people on stage who are all working together, but also we're willing to help you. And so from a Cybersecurity Collaboration Center perspective, it's cybercenter.nsa.gov if you want to learn more about what we do. But what I will say specifically is that if you have an active DoD contract and access to non-public information, we have free cybersecurity services for you. They're very easy to sign up for. DIB
DIB_defense@cyber.nsa.gov, and it's very easy to enroll. I know, like DIB, it's like DIB, it's very, I want a uniform with it. I think it's a good way to get in contact with us. I have some additional questions that these guys are unprepared for. I'm happy to make them squirm. But I also want to just say if there's anyone in the audience that wants to start to come up to the 2 mics here. And of course, if you do not know, Mr. Neil Ziering, he works at NSA. He always has to ask the first question, no matter where he is, apparently. Neil.
Hey, Morgan and panelists, thanks for that really good discussion. I was going to hit you with a softball question, but after that intro, I can't.
Great.
Seriously, you've spoken very eloquently about the sort of the people aspects of information sharing and coordinated operation. Are there machine aspects to it? Is there automation that we should be seeking as government to be able to do stuff with private sector partners?
I'll take an initial stab and then turn it over to you guys. So what I would offer is that we see that there needs to be the right balance between people-to-people interaction and machine-to-machine sharing. I think that we've had examples in the past where we've tried to just, again, throw indicators out in an automated fashion to ensure that they were timely, but they had no context, so people stopped paying attention. And that really was not a method that worked well for us. The other part of that aspect is we were not receiving feedback on the information that we were sharing, so we didn't know if it was any good. And the only way that you upskill your workforce is by ensuring they understand whether or not what they're doing every single day is actually significant. And what they're doing is answering the questions that people actually need answered. And so I think that there's a combination, Neil. I think that we need to move to more of an automated format for sharing indicators with contexts. But most importantly, we need to do that with commercial tools that are familiar to the private sector and they're comfortable using. I would offer that creating something bespoke and saying, good luck, I hope you appreciate this, especially if it's from NSA necessarily, like that's probably not what people want. They want to use things they use every single day, right? And so I would offer, I know that we're pursuing a bunch of those capabilities in conjunction working with CISA and FBI and our colleagues and ETAC, hopefully to pipe some data into there as well. And so I know that there's a lot of initiatives underway. Clayton, did you want to offer anything?
I mean, you couldn't say it better. The only thing I would add to that is to say, in addition to just being able to automate large swaths of information, which we've done in various ways across this enterprise, even the way that we collaborate, we primarily used to share information through email, Excel spreadsheets, PDFs. We're still doing a lot of that today. But from a CISA perspective, we've added Slack, which is exciting for us because it at least allows us to engage in a real-time, bi-directional way that we weren't being able to do before. But we run 24 Slack channels across hundreds of partners, and how can we even automate the intake of the artifacts that we're getting in those channels? So we're working with collaboration tools that don't fully fit the scale of our mission yet. And then the results of that collaboration really is what feeds into things like our automated indicator sharing program and things like that. So there's a lot we can do in this space. I think there's a lot we can do to unify even the ability to do joint analysis at the federal level. And our goal in the long run is to make it easier for industry to then plug into those channels.
Todd, did you have something you wanted to offer?
It's exactly why we partner with Cloudflare. It's really to make sure we're leveraging a known quantity that already exists and is already being leveraged by a significant percentage of our financial sector in particular already as a resource, and then we add a plug-in on top of that, right? And as opposed to creating something new that we have to then get buy-in to, right? And that's the idea, is to be smart about it as well. Don't try to build something new just to build something new.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I would point out is it's not just about the automated sharing of technical information. Really what we need to move to is more joint analytical tradecraft development, right? That is going to enable us to do analysis at scale and really help just to have common language on how we're finding certain techniques, right? If you can create a fingerprint or a signature that enables us to actually search across massive data sets, which we all know we're going to. I think that that's going to be really where we move to from an operational collaboration perspective. I am going to put Cynthia on the spot. We've talked, she just got off a flight at 1 a.m. this morning, guys. Isn't that amazing? Just to be here with you. So what I would offer, we've talked about operational collaboration and working amongst the US government and working with industry. But the third leg of this triangle is our international partners. And so can you talk a little bit about the significance of also involving our international partners in a lot of the collaboration that we do?
Absolutely. So from the FBI side, we have legal attaches across the world and have for years. We're going to because many investigations go global, or we're working with local law enforcement to be able to help them conduct investigations in their country that also help the US. We've scaled that now for cyber to have legal attaches in 16 countries, plus we're going to be adding a few more here shortly, of having folks very laser focused on cyber within those legal attache offices. What that enables us to do then is to conduct cyber investigations at scale, well, at scale as 16 instead of, nothing, but be able to conduct investigations globally, but also help our partners globally. Albania is a great example, where we learned really quickly that the Albanian government was undergoing a cyber attack against their almost all of their services that they had put online for their government. And at that time, they contacted the US government and said, we need help. And so because FBI was in Europe, we were able to send immediately a cyber assistant legal attaché there to interact, see what more we needed, and at that time then sent an entire cyber action team, which is our technical teams that will send after an incident, either locally or internationally. We were there able to gather up all of the information we needed, worked side by side actually with Microsoft, who was on the ground there, to come to attribution within weeks, bring it back to the US, and then share it out so that we were able to talk about some new IOCs from an Iranian cyber actor and help protect other networks. And I think that that's just a good example of what happens in an incident. But internationally, just in general, being able to capacity build with all these nations, talk about what more do you need for your cyber service. I know CISA does a lot of great work there too, working cert to cert, but building that capacity, how do you respond, what do we all need, and then also being able to counter adversaries wherever they are. It doesn't have to be in the US, it doesn't have to be with US authorities. We all just want to have a safer world.
Thanks, Cynthia. So I know we have a few minutes left. I just want to give the opportunity to the panelists to say any parting thoughts. I'm going to ask you the question that I love asking. What are you most concerned about? What keeps you up at night? And what are you optimistic about? So Todd, if you want to quickly.
Yeah, it's a third-party risk, and we're taking the approach at Treasury of not trying to boil the ocean. We're starting with cloud. So we did publish a cloud study of the state of adoption across the financial sector in February. So please take a look at that if you haven't. It's a very, very large but great piece of work. But that's going to start a sequence of next steps that's going to take us through next year. We're going to work in lockstep with the financial sector and also critical cloud providers in particular to make sure that we're getting that part of the ecosystem correct. And Treasury is really going to play a leading role in implementing the national cyber strategy in terms of the cloud elements of it. And we have some existing authorities that we're going to think about leveraging to make sure that we get that part of the ecosystem right.
Thank you so much. Kyle.
I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of options to pick from in this space, which is not great. I'll say, Colonial was a pretty bad day, and it could have been much worse. And so I think, for me personally, it's a coordinated ransomware attack that maybe affects some targeted energy infrastructure, where a very capable actor has knowledge about the system and its criticality to a national critical function or to some other significant part of the U.S. maybe economy. So I think it's the actor with knowledge of the energy system that really keeps me up many nights.
Clayton.
I would say we put way too much responsibility on the end user. It's a really hard mission in critical infrastructure. Most of our day could just be spending time trying to get everyone's cyber hygiene up to a baseline acceptable level. And we put way too much work into it. We don't have the resources across that space to do that effectively. And I think as a national community, especially as an industry community, we have the responsibility to pivot that model. I'm concerned, we have learned a lot of lessons from the invasion of Ukraine. I think there's lots of geopolitical activity that continues that we need to be postured for across this group and across our whole nation. And this collective defense model is going to be more important than ever. And I'm optimistic that we're getting there. I think we've made a ton of progress over the past few years to really link in the key and critical partners in the space, and I'm looking forward to doing it more.
I think what I'm most worried about is we have been talking a long time about cyber actors who are in it for financial reasons or who are seeking to gain an industry advantage by stealing intellectual property. But I worry most, and what keeps me up most at night is the political consequences and the political reasons behind cyber activity of the future. Using cyber activity to message us, to try to influence us, and not just on, message us in terms of fake messages, but larger efforts to try to weaken a resolve in a future type of conflict. And that's what worries me the most, and that's what makes me also, that drives me to want to bring out this message and talk to on collaboration, because it's in those scenarios that we all can't do it alone. Now, each agency can't do it alone, each company can't do it alone. I think practicing this now, working now to counter the challenges that we face today, it gives us that muscle memory for what could be even larger issues in the future. And I think that that's exciting to know that we're prepared, we're working towards that goal, and we made so much progress. And I'm just really excited about the future in that I think we have this great foundation to be able to counter those kind of scary things that could come down the pike.
Just close us out, I would say the foundation of the cybersecurity industry is its people. It is hiring, it is workforce development, it is upskilling, and that's something that keeps me up at night on how do we build that workforce of the future? How do we continue to keep people invested in this mission and don't burn them out because they're working constant hours? We know our adversaries like long weekends, typically to do all of their activities. And so that is one thing I am focused on. The good news is the US government is hiring. So intelligencecareers.gov, we are all hiring, I think hot hiring summer.
The hottest.
The hottest from CISA. So please come find us at a booth. We really want people to get invested in this mission. And with that, I want to just thank all of you for coming today, listening to us and participating in the conversation. And I hope you have a good rest of the final day of RSA.
Tom's loves it.